Welcome to the Red Sneaker Writers Podcast. News, interviews, and writing tips for people who are serious about having a writing career and want some practical knowledge to help them achieve it. Your host is the nationally best-selling author of more than 50 books, William Bernhardt.
Ho, 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 Red Sneaker Writers. As I'm recording this, we're just past Christmas and a few days before New Year's, so I'm very much in the festive holiday spirit. We had a great holiday, and I'm hoping that you did too. And now we're looking forward to the year ahead. But we're writers, so, of course, even though the holiday season should be when you rest and relax, I bet you were writing. Should have been, and I bet you stayed very busy. I did in this past week alone. Let me think. My wife and I recorded by Zoom 2 holiday songs. That's up on Facebook if you want to check that out. I recorded a reading from my holiday novel, The Midnight Before Christmas. I made holiday suggestions. Plus, we've been running this big 12 Days of Christmas promotional contest online, giving away autographed books and, your name and my next book. It's all designed to promote my next novel, Final Verdict, which is now on pre-order. You can order it now. Looking forward to an official release on January 19. This is the 6th and final, at least for now, book in the Daniel Pike series. Now, I've got some big announcements coming in the year ahead, which I'm very much looking forward to. Put this year in the past and look forward to the future. I bet you feel the same way. Anyway, big announcements. And no, I don't just mean Final Verdict or whatever else I write in the year ahead, but talking about changes to this podcast, changes to the WriterCon website and WriterCon itself. So, if you have any suggestions about the podcast, about the conference, whatever, this would be a good time to tell me. Email me, wb@williambernhardt.com. What could be easier to remember than that? Or you can just go through my website, and there's a way to contact me there too. That's williambernhardt.com. While we're in the planning and revising stages, this is the time to share your ideas. So please do. Please send me any suggestions that occur to you. For this episode, my very special interview guest. I mean, it's the special holiday edition. So who could possibly be better than my friend, New York Times-bestselling author Steve Berry? Yes, that Steve Berry, the master of the international and historical thriller, like books like The Warsaw Protocol and many others. He's been on the podcast before talking about writing in general, but this time I asked him specifically to address series characters. What makes them click? What makes them successful? And who better to speak on this topic than the man who gave us, among others, Cotton Malone, probably one of the 2 or 3 most successful series characters of the last 20 years or so of publishing. So that's an interview you want to hear. But first, the news. I'm starting the news segment with what I think is one of the most bizarre stories coming out of the writing world, like ever. Apparently, for some time now, although it's just been reported in a breaking story from the New York Times, apparently for some time now, someone, nobody's quite sure who, has been stealing unpublished manuscripts. And just to be clear, I'm not talking about people like possibly those of you listening to this podcast, unpublished, unsold, and still working at it. I'm talking about people who have sold books, who have publishing contracts, but prior to the release of the book, even prior to the release of review or advance copies, someone has been hijacking their manuscripts, which is really a bizarre and hard to fathom thing to do. Sure, we know that there's illegal piracy and you can download books on the internet, but that's nothing new. And that usually happens when the book goes out in ebook format. This is happening much earlier, and the manuscripts are not turning up online for download. So why? What's going on? This has targeted many major authors like Margaret Atwood and Ian McEwan, Ethan Hawke, who you may also know as an author. Books have included Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid and The Sign for Home by Blair Fell. And what's behind it? Now, I don't want everybody to run into a panic. Like I said, they're not going after unpublished manuscripts from people who are still breaking into the writing world. But whoever the thief is that somebody has some information about the publishing world. They're sending emails that look credible, look like they are coming from an editor or an agent, and use lots of publishing jargon like, I've read your partial. Can you send me the full manuscript and stuff like that? Why? What's the theory? People have speculated, but no one really knows. One theory advanced that I think is the most credible is that the pirate could be someone from the literary scouting community. And just in case you don't know, scouts are out there looking for potential properties for development as films or television series. And this year, of course, has been a blockbuster year for Netflix and other streamers, and a lot of the most successful properties have come from books. Pretty Little Liars, or The Queen's Gambit, or The Flight Attendant, all came from books, particularly when people are doing, an 8-episode or 10-episode series, but it's all telling one continuous story. Books are a great source of information. So there's always been people competing to get advance copies and then report to whoever they're scouting for, motion picture company most commonly, but it could be a lot of, production companies or whatnot. That goes on all the time. And of course, it is a race to be the first person to recommend the project and then the first person to buy the manuscript in question before there's a big bidding war because everybody wants it. So that's at least a possible theory, but nobody really knows for sure what's going on. I do want to again make the point that this scam is targeting manuscripts that have already been sold, not manuscripts by authors who have not yet sold them. They've been sold but not published. But if you're still noodling on something, I don't think you need to worry about emailing it to your friends or beta readers. This is something different. I know from the workshops I've conducted and retreats that sometimes people are paranoid about sharing anything about their manuscripts, and that's a mistake. Getting feedback from people is almost always a good idea. This is something different. But it is something very weird and worth being aware of. Of course, if you're still working on a book and it really is being swiped by somebody who's scouting for a motion picture company, then having your manuscript be in their hands may not be the worst thing that could happen to you. But it is very disturbing for publishing companies who are hoping to control the process. Let me give you another story. This one has to do with the CASE Act, C-A-S-E, which I mentioned before. It's an idea of basically creating a small claims court for copyright cases, a way for people to prosecute infringements online or anywhere else of their copyrighted material, like your books. Typically, this has been hard, complicated, and required major legal fees. Well, now, with this new Copyright Claims Board within the U.S. Copyright Office, you can bring claims even without an attorney. I mean, get one if you want to, but you don't necessarily need one as long, and you pay a fee between $100 and $350, depending upon what exactly it is you're fining. And you can request up to $15,000 in damages. That's why I call it small claims court. There is an upper limit, but you don't need an attorney. And this might make it more accessible for people, regular people, to defend their copyrights. So I think this is a good thing. Just to be clear, as I'm recording this, it has passed Congress, but our president has not yet signed the bill. It is part of the current Coronavirus Relief Act, which everybody thought was going to pass easily. And then the president made a speech criticizing it, and then people started trying to revise it. And now we're not exactly sure what's going to happen. I think it's going to pass, though, one way or another. And even if it doesn't pass this session, it's going to pass next year. So this is a good thing to know about. Because this is the end of the year, I wanted to give you kind of a sales wrap-up, although probably none of this will be a surprise if you've been listening to this podcast for a while. But book sales are up. We are one of the lucky ones that in a tough year, when a lot of people have seen a lot of financial problems, book sales have actually gone up, and ebooks in particular have soared, although even print books, even with bookstores mostly closed, print book sales are up about 8%. A lot of that, of course, is happening online. And some of that is fueled by big-name authors. In particular, of course, President Obama recently published his book, Promised Land, which last I looked had already sold over 3 million copies in hardcover. I mean, that's an extraordinary number. Most years, we don't see a book that does anything like that. And there have been other politically themed blockbusters too, so that may be distorting the numbers somewhat, but still, book sales are clearly up. The bad news, of course, is that independent bookstores' revenue is way down. I doubt if Barnes & Noble had a banner year either, but clearly the independent bookstores have been hard hit. They've lost, by most estimates, about 30% of their sales overall. At least 58 stores, according to the ABA, have closed this year, and they're estimating that about 20% of all existing independent bookstores may close soon. If you have an independent bookstore that you love, or you just want to support independent bookstores, as we all should, this would be a great time to find a safe way to do it. Of course, who is benefiting most from all of this? That, of course, would be Amazon, the largest bookseller and largest retailer in the United States. They've seen revenue increase by 37%, and that was the number recorded at the end of the third quarter. I mean, that's even before we got to Christmas. They were up 37%, and their sales weren't exactly puny before. So this company is really growing. Bottom line here, Red Sneaker Writers, people are still reading, and people are still buying books. I know I've talked a lot on this podcast about artificial intelligence and sites like Author AI that may be able to help with the editing process, maybe, but it cannot replace you. The world is still very much waiting for your story, Red Sneaker Writers. So make the time for this and sit down and write. My writing tips section this time is inspired by an article I read online. This actually appeared in Oprah magazine, not where I normally go for information about the publishing industry, but this was a great article and you can read it online for free. It's called I'm a Romance Novelist Who Writes About Politics and I Won't Stay in My Lane. This was written by Alyssa Cole, who is a very successful romance writer. And the point is that she's not embarrassed at all about using the real world. Yes, she's writing a popular fiction, obviously entertainment, but still isn't afraid to address contemporary issues. For instance, she says, and I'm quoting here, that the happily ever after in the most recent romance book she wrote, quote, comes only after Shanti and her king, Sanyu, navigate toxic masculinity, a government made of old men who refuse to respect fresh ideas